TCI is brought to you by Spendthrift's leading sire Malibu Moon, sire of 11 Grade 1 winners including Kentucky Derby champ Orb and 2017 Derby contender Gormley, winner of last week's Santa Anita Derby.
Welcome back to TCI, your inside track to the Triple Crown alongside Joel Cunningham. I'm John Siegel. Well, Joel, we have a lot to recap, so let's jump right in. Let's start off with the Wood Memorial. You know, Irish Warcry was a horse we were very interested in going into the weekend. A lot of people had high hopes for this horse going into the Fountain of Youth. He disappointed in there, but Joel, he looks like he's back in the Wood Memorial.
He really does, John. I saw some things visually that I really liked that I had not seen before. Even in his win in the Holy Bull that everybody was so impressed about. The ability for him to get into a rhythmic stride, to settle, and really, to be able to sit off the pace. Now, he did make, a bit of a move going into the far turn to get into contention there. But I just liked his overall rhythm and stride. He didn't look near as eager and keen to me and on the muscle as he looked in his race at Gulfstream. His ability to settle, John, and then finish off of it, I thought was very impressive. And look, you look at him physically, certainly Graham Motions had success at Churchill with Animal Kingdom, and Curlin, with that classic pedigree, no stallion, in my opinion, has had more of an impact on the classics in the last few years than Curlin. So a lot to like now. A 101 Beyer speed figure. I think he ran a 6 on the sheets, which is respectable for this crop. I don't think you got to be that fast to win the Derby this year, John. I mean, we'll talk about the quality overall in the coming weeks. So I definitely think now, based on that visual performance, not the fact that he ran past Battalion Runner, who I thought ran disappointing in there, not even really the end Beyer speed figure or anything in particular, even though those grade out with this crop. I liked what I saw. We always liked his talent. I liked what I saw personally in terms of his maturation, his ability to rate, get into a rhythm. Now, having said that, he faces the same thing that Always Dreaming faces. 2 top quality colts that are going to be under 10-1 now in the Kentucky Derby. Neither one of them has had a straw in their path in their life coming up to this race. So I'm still concerned about, how would they overcome adversity? How would they, take dirt and those sort of things, ping pong around like you may do in the Derby? How will that test their constitution? Because we don't know how battle tested either one of them are yet. But they're big-time talents, and they certainly deserve, in a year like this, to be major Derby players.
All right, let's go out to California now. Let's talk about the Santa Anita Derby. This race was obviously missing one big horse, that's Mastery. It's interesting to see the California horses now. And we saw a horse in American Anthem who people still wanted to see really run well. We were ready to draw a line through the Arkansas race and say, okay, let's see this horse just go ahead and do his thing. Try to put him out in the lead and let's see if he can win. Joel, you have to say, out in California again, it was another disappointing day for the California horses.
Well, that's why you got a full field in Santa Anita Derby, because there's no distinguished favorite in here. I think Baffert's horse, Reach the World, was a favorite. He couldn't even win an allowance race in his previous start. So really, it was nothing but hype with Reach the World, but that just showed you with Mastery out. This race was wide open. Let's go to the race replay here, and we'll take a look, and we'll see Battle of Midway on the lead here. He went 22 and change for the opening quarter, going a mile and 1/8, and he hangs around. I think a lot of these riders, you were talking about American Anthem, you want to talk about Royal Mo. I think they saw that Santa Anita Oaks with that filly Freak on the lead, and they said, you know what, we need to take a tactical advantage. The way this track's playing, Santa Anita inside can play to speed, and you see here, speed holds on. But to me, the best horse with the ability to accelerate and have back class at Santa Anita won the race, and that was Gormley. We said going in, we really felt like the class of the race was the horses coming out of the sham. Gormley is now a multiple Grade 1 winner. He was 6-1 in the race, but really I don't think he should have been. He had a clunker that was inexcusable last time out in San Felipe, but he loves this track. He has an ability to accelerate. He's a multiple Grade 1 winner now, as said, so he had the class edge over this, and it showed in the end, John. But Battle of Midway, for him to be there at the wire, courageous effort. However, he ran, I think, a 10 on the sheets or something like that. Some maidens run faster than that. It's because he got on that speed bias rail. Didn't matter how fast you're going against this type of field, you're able to kick on, and that's why he was runner-up in here. So to me, I think it was more of a product of the racetrack, and the lack of quality in the field is why Battle of Midway was there for runner-up at the end.
All right, well, you mentioned Curlin for Irish Warcry. You have to mention Malibu Moon here and remind everybody, he already had a Derby winner in Orb, so now he's got another legit contender. It looks like Gormley's back to form. Be interesting to see what he does here in the next couple of weeks.
I've always liked this colt in terms of, when he shows up. I think he can run with just about anybody, particularly this crop. So I do think Gormley, if he shows up at Churchill Downs, I do think he's a contender in the race. But what Gormley are you going to get? Are you going to get the one that didn't show up in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, the one that didn't show up in the San Felipe, or are you going to get the one that, you know, ran Klimt off his feet in the front runner and then came back here and was able to overcome a speed bias and actually show a turn of foot and beat a full field in Santa Anita Derby? Be very interested to see what Gormley shows up to Churchill Downs.
All right, well, let's talk about the Bluegrass now. You know, this dropped down to a grade 2, but Joel, it was a very high-class field in here, including your number 1, McCracken. You know, watching that race, you can kind of say, look, McCracken may have needed a race, but just tell me, how disappointed were you in McCracken's run?
Well, I was disappointed in the run, but look, I'll just come out and say it. You know, IRAP wins on his wrong lead. He looks like he's a horse that's just looking to get caught. I mean, let's show the race replay here. We knew there was no speed in the race, and it played out like that. IRAP, I didn't know if he's quick enough to take advantage, particularly with the blinkers off.
Yeah.
But the horses that we talked about, 3 outside horses, took a tactical edge because they were outsiders and they had shown some tactical ability in the past. And Practical Joke made a big middle move to kind of get into position. Good ride there by Joel Rosario, seeing that slow pace, using a little bit on going into the far turn to get him there. But he still flattens out and doesn't want to go by, John. I mean, look, on his wrong lead, IRAP finishing up on the wire here. I mean, I think the inside part of the track, I think was certainly playing the speed late in the day, and there was no pace in the race. IRAP finishing on his wrong lead, doesn't look good doing it. Practical Joke, you know, to me, ran an honest race, but still, even makes you wonder even more. You know, he's a nice horse. Can he be a classic horse with his pedigree? And when you see him run flat in the stretch again like that, like he did in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, like he did in the Fountain of Youth Stakes, not really show much of a punch the final 16th, really questions whether or not he has the stamina to show his best, you know, at a classic distance still coming out of this. McCracken, I thought, ran valiantly there. He was a little keen, you know, early. I didn't like his works leading up to the Bluegrass as much as everybody raved about them. To me, they were just okay works. They weren't spectacular works. I saw much better works from him earlier this year at Gulfstream Park when he, you know, prior to the injury. So I think he legitimately probably needed this race, John, and I think he ran well enough, and we know he's a horse for course at Churchill Downs, so I think he'll move forward off of this. But here's what I'll say about the race. Tappert, you know, had trouble, slammed out of the gate. Matter of fact, McCracken initiated the contact, came into J-Boy's Echo and Tappert. Tappert had to go wide last on the, you know, going in the first turn, behind a slow pace, and he was just out of sorts the whole time. And again, you worry about Tappert mentally. Is he mentally developed enough to handle a race like Kentucky Derby? McCracken is, but this race, he's a quick twitch, one run closer. Didn't set up for him. Same with J-Boy's Echo. Got in a little trouble going into the far turn there. Robbie is able to split, get him outside. I thought he finished pretty well, J-Boy's Echo. So when you see 3 quality closers like that, neither one of them making an impact on the race, and all of them are graded stakes winners in their last race, to me, it's a race you can draw a line through. It's too bad to be true. I think multiple horses out of the race will, you know, come out and be legitimate Kentucky Derby contenders next month.
All right, so we looked at all these races now. We know who punched their ticket to the Kentucky Derby, but let's see what the TCI top 10 looks like after your number 1 looked a little bad in the Bluegrass.
The TCI top 10 is looking rough, John, and I'll be honest with you. Below my top 5 here, I've got no confidence in a colt winning the Kentucky Derby. Now, that may change this weekend, but I really like my top 5. I think the Derby winner is going to come from the top 5 this year. Look, I'm going to leave McCracken in the top spot until I see Classic Empire run this weekend, see how that Arkansas Derby unfolds. Gunnevera, I'll leave him there for now too, even though I have concerns about him. Classic Empire, we talked about him. Big opportunity now. I don't think he catches a great field in the Arkansas Derby. You know, will he be able to show he can get back to his top form? Always Dreaming, he may wind up higher than that. What I did, John, basically I just moved Battalion Runner down from 3 to 8. The only horse I allowed to jump another horse was J-Boy's Echo, just because I liked him a little better than Tappert in the Bluegrass. And the fact that they ran together, I was comfortable moving him up a spot over Tappert for now. My top 10 may look totally different next week. I think you'll probably see Irish Warcry, Always Dreaming, maybe ascend up the list a little bit, but for now, that's what I'm comfortable with. And again, like we talked about, we want to see all these major preps and be able to decipher all of them in hindsight before I really want to do a lot of jostling in that top 10.
All right, we'll talk about the Arkansas Derby in a second, but this is the weekend we have to talk about Derby points, you know, because you really have this last big race that horses can punch their ticket in. Yeah. What I'm interested in, McCracken, Battle of Midway, Patch, Battalion Runner, and Cloud Computing, all tied with 40 points. After this weekend, you're going to see Classic Empire, who's currently 21. And you're also going to see Untrapped, who it's currently number 20.
Sure.
They're probably going to earn enough points to punch their ticket into the Derby after this weekend.
Sure.
So somebody's going to get knocked down that list. Tell me, how do they handle a tie in this new point system?
Yeah, they go by non-restricted stakes earnings. So, you talk about a colt like McCracken, he's got, somewhere around $385,000, I think, in non-restricted stakes earnings. The other colt you mentioned after that, Battle Midway, ran second in a $1 million race, but he also hit the board in San Vicente. So he didn't only get $200,000, 20% of $1 million in his final prep. He also got some San Vicente money that was able to make him second on that list. Patch, a horse that's only been, runner-up in a major final prep, the Louisiana Derby, $1 million, so he got $200,000. Well, I think it's a very interesting thing with Pletcher's horses. Now, Patch gets in, Battalion Runner, he may not get in because now, even though he was second in the final prep because the wood was downgraded, it's not a $1 million purse anymore, it's $750,000. So he has less in non-restricted earnings than Patch, so he's on the cusp. Same thing with Cloud Computing, John. 2 minor prizes in both the Gotham and the Wood Memorial. So he's the last of the horses with 40 points in terms of preference to get in. Those horses are really going to have to hold on because, who knows what's going to happen this Arkansas Derby, John? A horse like Sonneteer, looking at Lee, what if he finally gets paced this weekend?
Yep.
He could forge on the list. So I do agree with you. I think that there are 2, maybe 3 horses from the Arkansas Derby that could work their way on the list and kick out some of the horses like Cloud Computing with Italian Runner.
All right, well, let's take a look at the Arkansas Derby real quick. And I just wanted to talk about the quality of the field. It feels so tilted to class. Classic Empire really should be able to win this. When I look through here, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 maiden winners in this field, 2 horses that haven't even won a race yet, and then you got Classic Empire, who just happens to be a champion, and you got and then you got Malagacy in there, who's a horse that's really been running well in Arkansas. Tell me, Joel, does Classic Empire is this his race to lose?
I believe it is. And what's interesting about these preps is we've become used to the Arkansas Derby being the prep now, or the Florida Derby. Santa Anita Derby's even been good. Those races, the Florida Derby is pretty good. I don't know what was behind. And once Gunnevera faced a speed bias track, I don't think anything was really behind the winner, in my opinion. Santa Anita Derby wasn't a great race. We talked about the Wood being a bad race this year. To me, that's been the best prep, just because I like the way the winner ran, and I thought the runner-up was a pretty nice horse that needed the race. Battalion Runner hadn't run in a couple months. And I think he's a good colt. He probably needed that race, John. So if you're looking at 1-2 finishers in these races, I think the Wood was as good as really any of them. You look at the Arkansas Derby here, and you have a lot of them going for that Grade 1 status and $1 million. But in my opinion, Classic Empire, if he returns to form, he is heads and shoulders over this group, and that's including Malagacy, who breaks from the 12-hole Malagacy. He's going to have to show speed out of there. And I'll tell you what's interesting. Pace makes every race, as we said, and we saw that in the Bluegrass. When I see Rockin' Rudy, a bona fide sprinter with a one-turn type pedigree, breaking from the rail and the speed he's shown around one turn, I think he's going to have to show speed. And then you look to the far outside. Who has to show speed there? Conquest, Mo Money, Malagacy, 2 tactical horses that have to push out of there. And then I'll go a step further. You noted how many maiden winners, and even a couple of horses that haven't broke their maiden yet, that are in this race. So there's no depth of quality in here. Usually when you see that and you see speed indicators like I talked about, what do? You get a strung out field. And what does that do? That helps a horse like Classic Empire, who even though he drew down on the inside in the 2-hole, in theory with a long run in the first turn, Julian should be able to find a pocket, and if the field strings out, which normally when you see this many cheap horses, it can string out going a mile and 1/8, that gives Julian room to maneuver around, make the moves, put his horse in a position. And look, fitness could be an issue, but they've pretty much stayed on this colt since last summer at Churchill. He hasn't really gotten much of a break. He missed a little training earlier this year. His works have been pretty steady lately. I think he's so classy, even though he may not be his best, I think he should win this race. And when I look at the prep coming in, the Rebel, John, let me just tell you what I think about the Rebel. There's none of those horses on my top 10, but this is why. Sonneteer, 112-1. He'd run 8 previous times as a maiden, hadn't broken his maiden yet, and he comes to Oaklawn and runs 12 points higher than the best buyer of his life in his previous 8 starts at 112-1. and second, beaten 2 lengths by Malagacy. So I look at Malagacy, a horse at the barn has always questioned his quality and wondered how far he would go. So he was classy enough to handle middle distance. I think good one-turn horses can handle a middle distance in their first start, particularly against a bad field. I just don't believe in that race at all. Even Untrapped, getting blinkers on, nice horse. Untrapped can definitely hit the board here because I don't think there's much quality behind Classic Empire. But look at Untrapped, John. I mean, he's always been a bridesmaid himself. He got beat by Guest Sweet in the LeCompte. But where's Guest Sweet now? And then Gervin beat him a couple lengths. Obviously a nice horse in the Risen Star. But I just don't think that he's a top shelf colt either. So this isn't a good race. And frankly, I'll be embarrassed for Classic Empire if he doesn't beat this field because I'm not a believer in Malagacy going a mile and 1/8.
Well, I'll just say one thing about Malagacy. I remember Shackelford, a lot of people thought that he wouldn't get that classic distance. Did pretty well in the Derby, came back and won the Preakness. So
Absolutely.
We'll see what happens with that horse, but I agree with you. This is Classic Empire's time to shine. He's a champion. He should be able to beat this field, I think, for sure.
Yeah, I agree, and I think he could beat this field rather decisively.
All right, thank you, Joel. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure you come back next week. We'll recap the Arkansas Derby, and we'll figure out who's going to be in this year's Kentucky Derby.